Okay, so we are joined today by a seriously heavyweight guest. Sorry, just to be clear, I mean that in the figurative sense, Chris, not the literal sense. Luckily, there's no room for doubt. um, so Chris has held some very senior pre-sales positions at some of the world's largest software companies. And that being said, from my interactions with Chris, you've always come across as incredibly kind of down to earth, genuine, and humble. So it's fantastic to have you here.
Thank you very much for inviting me and those kind words. Thank you.
Yeah, genuinely spoke. So, okay, good. Are you able to briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah.
For those
Well,
that don't know you?
yeah, and as you said, I worked for SAP and Oracle and Adobe, but I've also worked at startups and pre-IPO organizations. I started off in pre-sales from being an expert in the procurement software side of things, and then found myself in management positions at SAP, and then somehow during a horrible redundancy process ended up leading the UK and Ireland SAP team, and then took on some European responsibilities before moving on to startups and then back into the big teams again, like Oracle and Adobe. So yeah, I've been 25 years in the IT industry. Previously a chemistry graduate, which is relevant, we'll talk about later on.
Okay.
But in the chemical and pharmaceutical industry for 8 years before getting into software and the lucrative salaries there.
Fantastic. Well, I suppose chemistry is important when it comes to hiring and recruiting. So
Absolutely, yeah. That's not quite the connection I'm going to make in a minute, but yeah.
I couldn't resist. It's my bad sense of humor.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. And on that note, actually, in terms of hiring and recruiting, well, just in general, in terms of pre-sales leadership, one of the reasons that I'm really happy that we're having a conversation today is I know that you've put good work into developing your own competency model for pre-sales, which I think is one of the few competency models out there. So I'm really keen for us to go into depth in that respect. And before we do that, a question we ask everybody that comes on: what do you love about pre-sales?
Well, I think the thing that I certainly miss by being a manager and leaders in pre-sales was what I loved most was that standing up, you prepared well, you're hitting the audience's interests. They're engaged. They're asking questions. You're able to discover. You're able to impress, confirm, and be able to bring them on that journey to show that. And that kind of presentation, I've linked it before in my mind to amateur dramatics or being on the stage. Doing the presentation, getting the audience behind you, and getting the equivalent of loud applause at the end of the standing ovation. That's what I love doing that, and I love especially seeing lots of different companies and learning about them. And I'm trying to do that all the time in my current role. Just getting out and meeting lots of different companies and customers and sizes and industries. I loved all that. Being a procurement expert meant I did go everywhere. It wasn't any particular industry that I was as tied to. So I love I'm curious, and I love maybe showing off a bit.
I love the passion that you have when you talk about pre-sales. Thank you so much, Chris. And if we are going a little back to the competency model, it was very interesting for me to read it this morning. So, what was the main goal that you have in mind when you started to build it, and why did you create it?
Yeah, we created it back in 2008, and I mentioned that horrible redundancy process. What it was two companies came together, and we had to make some, efficiency moves. This is while I was at SAP, and we realized sitting around a room with managers from one company and managers from the company I was in, or we all become one, we didn't have a common language for what good looks like. We knew who were good presenters or who the salespeople liked, but we didn't have a common language for trying to describe well, those who somehow good in front of customers but toxic around the water cooler, as they say. You know, the language of performance, and we were making some hard decisions about who to keep and who not. And so it was born out of that, which is the complete opposite end of the recruitment cycle competency model. But it then grew into something bigger and bigger from that.
It is very interesting. Sorry, and I didn't know that. Even though the competencies, some of them are pretty similar to the ones that we found. So, yeah, maybe the circumstances, like the performance is the performance. It doesn't matter.
But it was thinking about performance, thinking about development of individuals, making sure that we weren't just using one sort of sheep dip process in training, that we did it to individuals and we understood kind of the areas that they needed either training on or coaching or some experiences. We also looked at it from the point of view of career progression, so that we could further sort of develop the descriptions of the competencies from sort of junior to career entry to senior to principal. And certain competencies may be pretty consistent through those. Other ones, which we're going to talk about in a minute, if you're a principal, you really want them to be a coach or a mentor to a junior person. So that's in their description that's associated with teamwork. So it's sort of a career structure. It is performance management. It's a development tool, and then of course it was then used to help us on the recruitment side. I'd say not as much as it should have been. Competency recruitment is something I guess we could talk about later on, but it's usually only used with graduates or something where they don't have the experience in their CV. So you're looking for something they were doing at university that might be applicable and you could use to take a leap. So it came for lots of different reasons.
Thank you for sharing this with us. And I saw that the model is based on 3 levels. Could you please walk us through the foundational level, the domain knowledge, communication skills, and sales methodology?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So the foundational skills, as I say, are the kind of the ones that I think everybody would jump to straight away and say, what makes a good pre-sales person? Well, they need to know their product or their industry or their area of expertise well. They need to know it well, their domain, their domain knowledge. But they also need to be able to communicate it, and that means that the different personalities or different personas that they deal with, the different levels of the organization, they need to always be translating it to make sense to whoever should be receiving it. And obviously, so good communicators who know their domain knowledge, that could really just be a teacher or a trainer. The other aspect that I think is fundamental and makes a difference from a teacher or a trainer is the sales acumen or sales. You're part of the sales process. We're here presenting to whoever it is because it's part of a sales cycle, and there's a reason for the meeting, and we need to understand. So breaking those down, communication is not just spoken. It's reading body language and understanding EQ and the non-verbal communication. It's your written communication in RFPs and email responses, and it's your listening skills. You've got to listen with 2 ears and use one mouth kind of scenario. So it's discovery and understanding. And so I kind of break the communication down to those 4 levels. And all the way through this, I always will talk about how you have to break it down to the next level down so that you can get closer to evidence. And so that you can, as a manager working with somebody or as an individual just thinking about their own, is like what proof points do you have? And I'll cover that a bit more, but you need to go down. You can't just say communication, you have to go to the next level down. Domain knowledge, obviously I say the word domain because sometimes we just think as pre-sales people are product people who know their product inside out, but they could be industry experts, they could be security experts, they could be value consultants, who understand that area of how to construct a business case. And the domain knowledge also includes understanding competitors as well, and the landscape and the things that are happening all around, not just your product in your company and know it really well. You've got to understand, so you can develop some of the other competencies around thought leadership. Yeah. The sales one, we often look at that to do with planning before the meeting. What's the meeting for? What am I trying to achieve? What are we trying to get to? It's about team selling, working with the sales people. It's about filling in things like your CRM systems, keeping those up to date, and just really thinking along the lines of how to be best at moving the deal on. And sometimes that is shutting up when you're halfway through your demo and you realize they love it. You don't need to do any more. And if you actually sometimes go too far, you can confuse them or even add more questions than you really did want to encourage. So, that's very different from a trainer who's got to deliver the whole training course. You stop halfway through if they're happy.
Yeah.
So those are the foundations.
Fantastic. And what's really interesting when I listen to you talking through them all is that it's a mix of, so you talk about, for example, do you prepare the meeting, and these are all kind of learned hard skills that anyone can do, but then there's also aspects that are more kind of underlying attributes and abilities, and you're kind of looking to marry the two together. And when you talk about proof points, again, I know that you come at this from a slightly different angle, in the sense that we look at it from a hiring angle, and you've looked at it more once people are onboarded. But I think ultimately it's the same thing. And when you're hiring as well, it's just so important to look for those proof points and kind of balance your intuition with as many kind of proof points as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was talking to a former colleague of mine at SAP the other day, and didn't really realize how many graduates they're bringing into the organization, not just as a sort of placement, but they're also recruiting them into the teams. And of course, those where you've got to try and assess whether people have that good, strong EQ, or have the natural communication skills, understanding, that they won't have the domain knowledge yet, and that's going to be something that's added. But I think it's with all these competencies, you can look for ways to find evidence in people's their university experiences or their part-time jobs or something to help you, not just look at the CV and how many years they worked at X or Y company.
Yeah. And I completely agree that competency models, and also things like psychometric testing, which are often links to the competency models, they're very commonly used at that kind of graduate level. And I get it, you're looking at a bunch of people that aren't the finished article, and it's a lot less clear, versus a SE from Salesforce who's been doing it for 10 years, and you can look at their achievements and get into the nuts and bolts and so on. But I do think that from a recruiting perspective in pre-sales, there are different kind of candidate pools. So one might be an SE from Salesforce, or from, name your vendor here, from the direct competition. And there it's quite easy to assess, or it's easier to assess the individual, if that makes sense. But it's also a very hot, competitive, expensive place to go. And oftentimes the best hires that we've seen oftentimes have come from consulting roles, they come from industry, so they're experienced individuals that have the domain knowledge part of things, but things like communication skills and sales methodologies are the big questions in terms of making the jump from a consulting role or from an industry role. And so I think I personally feel that maybe the pain isn't quite so acute for people assessing, because they've got more to hold on to. But I think there's really relevant kind of data there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of my big things that I'm, my background, as I said, was chemistry, chemical industry, and I was worked in various manufacturing roles in plant manager and procurement and strategic buying. That's why I got into procurement software. So I have a degree that isn't an IT computer science degree, I'm certainly a big fan of diverse backgrounds, and I'm meeting a lot of companies at the moment which maybe are smaller than SAP, and they have a sort of a nearer, they're newer, younger, and they've had to have really strong IT skills because their products were a bit early stage. Perhaps the demo prep was a lot of coding and a lot of technical work to make it work for the day. But as you gradually get maturer, then bringing in people from other backgrounds other than pre-sales, is possible to bring in, bringing in people that have got industry experience, who've been the customer, they've been on the other side of the table, and understand the challenges to a much deeper level. And I've seen some brilliant people who've never been that deeply technical, and never needed to be.
Yeah, 100%. And again, looking back through all of the hires that we've helped companies with, oftentimes, especially the industry, people that come from industry, they can make the transition to pre-sales and they get a buzz from pre-sales, which often happens. You've got just such a motivated individual with a whole new challenge and doing all, when you talked about what do I love about pre-sales, suddenly being able to do all these things on a much more kind of regular basis. And at the same time, the customer seeing them kind of on an equal footing. And at the same time, kind of intimately knowing what it's like on the other side. It's just such an amazing combination.
Absolutely. And it actually reminds me of one thing I forgot to say to Isabella. So it was one of the things that I was a consultant for 6 years before I became a pre-sales. And, the pre-sales thing that I really loved was getting in, understanding what the customer is trying to do, perhaps because I did that role before, and, but I didn't have to do the implementation afterwards as well. So what it meant is that my curiosity, but also my attention span was much more satisfied by being in pre-sales, because I could solution, wherever I went, but I didn't have to then spend 2 years stuck on a project. So that was another reason. There's the dog barking.
We aren't going to cut this or edit it.
Unfortunately, we don't have AI-enabled dog removal tools quite yet, but I'm sure they're available.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask you about communication skills. So do you think there are some skills that are not trainable? Because I understand industry skills, this is something that you can train, domain knowledge, sales methodology as well. What about what John said, the underlying attributes? Is there
I think that's it. I think there's a bravery to doing pre-sales. There's a confidence you need to have. I mean, you obviously need to be able to hide perhaps your nerves when you're in front of the customer. And obviously some of those things go away with experience. But I think you're looking for obviously people who at least have the basics communication capabilities. That's why selection processes of demonstration and presentations is crucial, no matter what role they're going for. You need to know that they can look people in the eye and engage and listen and also talk sensible stuff in the meetings. And it's not for everybody. And I think it can look good on paper and everything else could seem good, and the experiences from industry could be great and everything else. But big part of it is walking into a room full of people who don't know you, and you've got to have instant impact. You haven't got weeks of projects to gradually get them to understand that your new strange nuances. No, you've got to have a good impact right from the start. And I think couldn't train that, I don't think.
Thank you. I was just curious.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's carry on through the model. So in terms of level 2, we have 4 competencies. Are you okay to walk us through those 4?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the idea of why I break it into blocks is there's foundation, which everyone agrees with. Then there's the next level, which I think are just things you should be good at, like working at a company. So they're not particularly, on the headlines, things that you think are unique to pre-sales, but they have certain unique elements to them. So, teamwork and attitude and agility and continuous learning. Absolutely every department should have people who are great team workers and have good attitude and agility and all those things. Now, this can change slightly. You can have different ones going in here, but teamwork, I then, I'm looking to break that down into the reality. You've got sales and pre-sales have to work well together, and very rarely, in my experience, pre-sales people just work completely on their own. So that sometimes they're on their own presenting, but some of the help they have, maybe doing the RFP process, maybe sharing and asking for help, and sharing good content, and really kind of working well with their other colleagues, so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time because someone's got a great thing that they already use and you can do it. Now, the other aspects are like coaching and mentoring, and the internal relationship building. So this is the one where I'd say, a junior person would be just willing to be mentored, whereas a principal person should be a mentor, to them. And you can have a different describer for those things. And sharing can be one where you say, for a junior person, just share amongst your immediate team, share things that you've found, some great intel on the competitor or some new trend that you think is useful. But your domain of where you share it to grows, and a principal should be sharing, I think, with colleagues across the globe in the whole organization, maybe posting things into SharePoint consensus, not consensus, Confluence and all those different places, and maybe sharing things on LinkedIn and everything else. So your domain grows, and where your influence grows, depending on what level you're in. The attitude one, that was the one we had to definitely drag in right from the very first start of the sort of redundancy process we talked about, because attitude, we were trying to say, well, that person's really good in front of the customer, but they always say no when I ask them to do something. There's always 16 reasons why they can't do it. You have to cajole them to do it. And then eventually they're good in front of the customer. But an attitude was really around something that we distilled into professional, and how you behave, and the quality, reliability, and motivation, etc., but also a change agent. And I think most of the situations we have with companies, there's lots of change going on. Pre-sales has got to keep evolving, and they've got to be willing to absorb changes, the org structures, changes to compensation models, changes to all the different things, and be helpful. And as you go up an organization in terms of if you're a principal, you've got to be really helping everybody else out and be a great change agent in those things. Agility is my favorite one, because agility is one we came up with saying, oh, that person can only ever deal with one thing at a time. They only want to work on one event. They want to do the planning, do the discovery, do the demo prep, and do the demo. And then when they finished it, they would come and say, right, what's next? Whereas what we most wanted from pre-sales people was that they realized that they had to manage a workload, and they had to prioritize, and they would have to set off asking some demo team to build something for them here, start some RFP thing, have a discovery call here for a different one, and just be able to juggle and spin those plates. They need to be able to plan your time, think about it, be able to cope with the workload. But the other ones was agility in front of the customer. So my last company, we called it audible readiness. So you walk into a room, you present, you got ready to present, you probably spent a weekend on this stuff, and you're going to do this demo, this presentation, and the customer says, well, we don't want to see any of that lot. We want to see this, or we've heard about this. We want to talk about something else. So agility is in the moment to be able to flex and to cope with what's thrown at you. Which is again a reality of working in a company. Final one, I have continuous learning, but that's something which is just about curiosity, being self-motivated. A couple of companies ago, I was working somewhere where they were saying, oh, I don't want to learn a new area. I'll never know it as well as I know my current thing, and never wanting to get into something, and of course just they get left behind in these situations.
So good. Okay, and what's so interesting is that as you talk through, I was thinking they all have a level of overlap as well.
Yeah.
So you talk about, for example, that kind of the prima donna loan shark type individual that's great at performing, but then isn't really willing to help out or say no to things. I think that kind of individual probably will struggle a bit with the teamwork side of things as well. It won't come so naturally, for example. And continuous learning. It seems to me that so the continuous learning again is that's to do with that kind of positivity and wanting to learn new things. That's fantastic. And I kicked myself a little bit when you said that agility was your favorite, because as I think you and I have discussed before, so we spent a long time developing a pre-sales competency model that we're very proud of. We work with a company called Sova, and I think collectively we did a great job, but we missed that completely. And when I heard your podcast with Don Carmichael, I mean, you said it, I was like, we missed it. And it's absolutely true, because, and for some reason in my head, I kind of link it a little bit to intelligence. In the sense, so there's a personality component, which is that kind of serenity, like in front of the customer, think on your feet, if you're, and I suppose that links to the positive attitude as well. If you're quite kind of optimistic minded, you're not being neurotic about, oh my God, what's going to happen and that sort of thing. And I think that this ability to hold lots of different things in your head, it seems that it's quite intelligence related. That's just a thought that I had.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I talk about the elements that are below the title agility, and all of the other ones really, we've when I've had the leadership roles, encouraged my managers to go to that level and trying to say, are they good at workload management? They're coping with 5 or 6 things. How many deals do they work on concurrently? That's great data points. You can start to see whether they've kind of got it naturally, or you're always having to sort out their problems because they've committed to doing too much, and you're always having to say, no, you can't do that, or she can't do this. Looking for evidence points in front of the customer is probably harder, but you need to get it from the salespeople, and you pick it up. But you're doing it at that level of detail. You're kind of essentially scoring in your mind how they are, so that there is you're identifying areas that maybe they could develop, or you could help them, coach them with how to manage their time or something like that. So if I have the word agility, are they good at agility? It doesn't help them. If you have to go that next level down, so they can think about what evidence there is, how do they cope with that curveball from the customer, and is there a coaching opportunity? So I can link it to development plans, link it to comparison. People are saying, oh, my person's brilliant, really agile, and then I say, oh, my person's agile. I say, well, how many deals do they work on? Well, you can get some numbers to do comparisons to see if your managers are a bit being a bit sort of generous, shall we say, or hard. She's rubbish at this because she can only do 7 things at once, that kind of thing. So I like to have numbers. I'm trying to get it to that, because too often I've found competency models don't help me with calibration, don't help me with being able to create anything meaningful, development-wise, coaching-wise. Too generic, not relevant for the job, for example.
I know what you mean. It makes for a great conversation, but it's not as practical, not as actionable as. Okay, good. And before we go onto the last level, just on that note, so when we talk about competencies like domain knowledge, that seems to me to be imminently trainable. When we talk about competencies and everything has a level of just underlying ability. Some people will get it will faster than others, but ultimately it's trainable. When we talk about things like agility, from your experience, to what extent is that trainable? Because it feels to me like it's not very trainable.
I don't know. You often get people being set on sort of time management courses or diary management things, or being able to I mean, what we're trying to do with all of them is you kind of put these things in place. You announce to all of the teams we now have these competency model, that we now have these things, and you can go and see what how to get promoted. You can go and see what sort of descriptions are the next level above. But we also, the big thing for us is to try and build like a brand awareness or an understanding of what good looks like, and showcase it to everybody. So that last company, we did a lot of newsletters, and we focused on one or two of those competencies, and we highlighted somebody who just happens to be brilliant at that competency. They're not brilliant on the whole, but they're great at this thing. And it's like, what's your secret? How do you do it? How do you manage your time? How do you manage to do 16 things when everybody else can only manage 2? And I try to teach it, try to show that it's possible, try to myth bust, that you can get somewhere. Celebrate people with awards, the half year, quarterly QBR sort of oriented things, the annual awards, always showing what good looks like, and that person's won that award because of this exemplary. Now, continuously, this person's learned a completely new area and is now the expert in it, and it's going to be visible to everyone and they can see it. So I think everything. Something will come from experience, something's good recruitment, hopefully, and I'm hoping that everybody can change by seeing it's possible, and it's not just some grand idea that the management cooked up.
Amazing. And on that note, it's so interesting. And I listened to your podcast with Don Carmichael, and you talked about looking for these kind of, I think you said exemplars was the idea.
Yeah.
And it is true. Some people, it's a bit like a football. Sorry, I always use bad sporting analogies. Okay. Like a football team, you'll have some players that can do everything well, and other players that are very good in certain areas. And so, but there's, you can learn from, each player can learn from the different players' kind of abilities. And so, as a part of some of the work that we've done with the report that we've launched recently, we've been looking at kind of quality of hire. And one of the things we've been saying is you need to link it back to the key criteria to hire, which probably would be these kind of competencies. And that there will be certain managers that, for whatever reason, are very good at assessing individuals. And there'll also be certain, if you look at all of the different competencies, if you measure quality of hire correctly, certain competencies will be consistently measured very well. Demos, presentations, and so on, and others less well. And so you can look, and so you can have the managers kind of as champions, if that makes sense. So they can then go in and help others to improve. And I imagine that if you're within an organization, you see someone, you think that person's got something really good about them, but I don't quite know what it is. And helping that be kind of distilled and it be made clear, it's because they've got this one thing that they do very well, that this kind of superpower. Sorry to use that phrase. That can be learned from. So I think that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing I've loved about having this structure and having it in place and having the common language between the managers, and even having some calibration kind of exercises when we look at people and where they all are against each of those competencies, it's more that it gives them structure for those conversations on a one-to-one basis. So that no one's perfect, always got someone to work on. I do believe in strength finders, that kind of idea of play to your strengths, but there's certainly areas, especially if they come in to say, hey, I want to get promoted, then it's like, right, let's look at the things above and let's see what evidence you have that you're currently operating at perhaps in certain areas a level above, and it gives structure and usefulness to the conversation. And that's the biggest feedback I ever got from the 3 or 4 places that I've done this, is that the managers are saying it gives them structure to their one-to-ones, it gives them focus, it gives them some area, and it is a bit tricky as a manager when someone says I want to get promoted, and depending on the environment for pay rises and promotions, and instead I want to be a manager, okay, right, that's always a tricky conversation. But it gives them an area to look at and say, right, let's focus on these couple of things. You go away, have a look at them, come back. How do you think you are doing in this area? And then, right, okay, so you want to be a principal. A principal says you've got to do a global project, global impactful project across the entire pre-sales organization. Right, we'll find one for you to do. and we'll fill in that missing gap in your credibility for the next level above. We'll find a project that you can work on, and it's so it's the manager's going, great, I'm not just having a hey, how are we doing, or oh, I've noticed you're doing this deal, what's going on with this deal. It gives them another different conversation, which is much more useful generally, and it's not about just the KPIs for this year either. It's about a development of that individual and where they want to go.
Amazing, good, yeah, and I'm definitely agreeing. Like having the structure as a platform for the conversation is good. Okay, good. So we're in terms of the level 3 elite level. What are the two?
Well, it's the level 3 is wherever I've been has actually had different things in it. So, a level 3 is probably in the bucket of the things that weren't in the job description when they joined. So we whoever we are, this company has to change, has to develop. There's some reason, maybe the size of the organization has grown, maybe they've acquired a load of companies, there's more solutions, there's a platform to sell now, it's not on-prem, it's cloud. There is an ambition to grow into enterprise. There is a request, a strategy to move down into the small medium businesses. So there's something that's changed that wasn't there when you first joined the company, and it means you've got to have some develop something which pretty much nobody's got yet. So in that area, in my last company, it was ownership. They said the pre-sales people, they turn up, do a great job, and then they go again. They don't want to build relationships up. They don't follow up with me, the salesperson, and say, how's it going? Or what's anything more I could do? Shall I try this? Shall I try that? They don't stay linked to the deal anymore. They move on, and they don't own this, they don't own that, was sort of complaints from sales management. Other places I've been, and quite often it's business acumen, it's value, it's doing business cases, being able to try essentially adding an extra skill that didn't exist before. And they say that the first one we came across with was thought leadership, because the trending of the buying process, where people are now trying to find out as much as they can from peers, from research, from places like Gartner, from forums they belong to, communities they belong to who's the best software out there to do whatever it is I've got a problem with. They're doing that, and their stats, or whatever the number is, they've probably made quite a lot of the buying decision before they ever meet the pre-sales person. So, with thought leadership, you've got to be influencing people before they pick up the phone to talk to that company. And that is often LinkedIn, but it can also be forums or communities, panels, podcasts. As at Adobe, there were some people who had hundreds of thousands of followers on their YouTube channel because they put content out there, often easier on the creative side because there's a lot of consumers or customers aren't B2B, but they are influencing as much as they can potential customers of your company, because that you're renowned, you are known for having good opinions on certain things. You're a thought leader in cybersecurity. You're a thought leader in how sustainability can make a difference to a software business and so forth. And I've had people like that their own personal brand is strong, and we benefited from it as well. So thought leadership is also sharing internally and bringing these ideas, bringing new creative things into the process. But the reason why we needed these things, they didn't exist before. Now we need to have some skills, and it's the one where I can let everyone off the hook, because you never were expected to be doing that when you joined, but now there's this new thing. So that bucket changes depending on where I work, and what the issues are, and what the stage of growth and maturity of that company is, and what their strategy is.
Amazing. Isabella, apologies. I'm just going to add one more thing, and then because I'm hogging the questions as always. So I heard once somebody talking about, so there's this whole idea, so when you talk about the thought leadership and so on, of the kind of management track and the individual contributor track.
Yeah.
And some people, and it's actually quite prevalent in pre-sales, some people just don't want to go up the management track. And so in terms of the individual contributor track, there was somebody who was talking about how the way to compare the two as to how you develop is when you're managing a team, if you manage a team of 10, that's your kind of leverage, if that makes sense. Yeah. You're multiplying yourself through the team. Obviously, the team members are a part of that multiplication.
Yeah.
And then when you're doing it through thought leadership, you're multiplying yourself. That leverage is kind of digital. And so, but the impact can be the same, if that makes sense. And so go do it, but you've got to prove that you're kind of 10xing yourself, you know, or that you would be through management. And I thought that was a really nice way to look at it, because it means there's not a limit on the individual contributor side. Yeah,
exactly. Well, going alongside when you ever present these competencies, you most of the places I've had sort of specialists and generalists as a kind of, never liked the term generalist, but it meant somebody who could talk about the entire portfolio of the products. And then there's other ones where they are the go-to person, globally renowned. And also I had a management and discussion as well, and talk about the route you come from coming into an organization. Do you go specialist? Do you go generalist? Are you manager? But try to show that principal is the same level as manager as well, to encourage people to have a worthwhile career as an individual. There isn't that many manager roles. And honestly, management is, when I talked to Isabella about the excitement of presenting on stage, of course, I lost a lot of that becoming a manager, and I sunk into internal meetings, into the background, and I got reflected glory. I enjoyed seeing the people I had coached doing really well, but it was, certainly software management is not necessarily as celebrated as in pre-sales. Winning the deals is the thing that matters most, really. And the rock star pre-sales person who's involved with the biggest deals is far more thought of than their manager who maybe coached them. So I try and encourage everyone to think of that. And I get what you're saying. There's a value. I mean, there's more value, I think, as principals who are sharing content, globally renowned brand, exemplar of this and that, coaching and mentoring other people, bringing them on, is certainly equally valued to a line manager, or maybe more, to be really honest.
I think there is always a trade-off, right? When you lose a source of meaning, you need to rebuild another one. So I believe a manager somehow lives through his trainees' experiences. And if there is a leader that is looking at this interview and he or she wants to build his or her own competency model, how could they take this model and adapt it to a specific company?
Yeah, I mean, the model is not, it's not perfect, but what I would encourage everyone to do is you take those sort of headlines that we mentioned today, or that are in your report as well, and try and write them as a paragraph, a statement describing that competency broken down to those levels I talked about at each level of the organization. How would you see a junior changing to a senior? What would they be doing more in that competency? What would the principal be doing that nobody else is doing? And so it's something that people can read and ingest and understand. Because you're trying to take ambiguity out of it. You're not trying to get different sort of interpretations of something, and you're trying to make it as useful as possible. One company, it was actually in Oracle. One of my managers there created a lovely website where you could say, right, I'm a specialist, and I'm a senior specialist. And it would show only what you're supposed to be doing and what the next level above is, and being able to just to help you with your own career development and so forth. So I would encourage managers to write it in paragraphs, write it with something, and then think about the data and the evidence that can support it, so that you can be fair, globally fair that you're telling somebody that they're at this level and they're doing a good job because they're doing the same things and behaviors that somebody right over here is doing. And then do lots and lots of awareness, communicate it, find exemplars of one competency, feature something, make a fuss of that particular competency this quarter, the next quarter a different one, and so forth. And alternatively, they could ask me to come along and help them. Well, that's the plan.
I just love how you said, so somehow they should translate these abstract notions into some tangible behaviors. And I also love the fact that you said that, you don't need just to say the person, okay, you need to learn this and this and this, but you also need to give them the opportunity, because maybe they are great presenters, but they are giving only very small deals and they cannot express themselves. So I thank you so much. And of course, if they have any doubts, I'm sure they are going to reach out to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And too often the only development plans I've ever seen for pre-sales people is, right, learn this of the product. It's right now, learn this. New versions come out, learn this, learn that. That's your dev plan. It's a profession. Pre-sales is something where profession means you've got to work at it. You've got professional bodies essentially. We've got podcasts, got training material, got books written, everything else going on, and all of those are focused on the soft skills, not the product bit. That's it's given. So
when you said that, I actually thought about, have you ever heard about this idea of kind of when you're prioritizing what to do, you've got kind of urgent versus important. And hard skills and soft skills feels a bit like that, like the hard skills gets thrown into the urgent bucket, but actually the competencies are more important ultimately.
McKinsey and Harvard Business Review both cited some numbers that said a good, effective pre-sales team gives you 6 to 13% higher revenue. What they mean by that is you'll have either bigger deals or less discounting. So you'll get more money for each opportunity. And you get 30% reduction in the sales time. So it is the soft skills that I would claim are providing higher revenue and the shorter sales cycle. And if that's not a good enough business case for a bit of training and some coaching and stuff, then I don't know what is.
Yeah, it's a good point. And we'll come on to that. So, okay, good, perfect. Okay. And so as a final question, we, as I mentioned before, so we also have developed a model from a slightly different perspective in the sense that it's related to hiring. I'm just curious to hear if you had there's a hell of a lot of overlap. Curious to hear if you had any thoughts, any comments, anything that jumped out to you. And there doesn't have to be anything. It was just in case there was.
I don't know. I suppose some of there is so much overlap that it's just a great endorsement and a great tick, isn't it, for it? But has hard conversations, I suppose, handling difficult conversations, objection handling, those things I hadn't put enough emphasis on, maybe in my model. And challenger selling is something that I know that SAP are strongly into, which would be, I'd say, an anathema to most other ones, where a lot of the times the earlier, junior, less mature companies pre-sales speak when spoken to, they do their bit and then shut up. Then there's are they allowed to do good discovery? That's great, but actually coming along and saying, I think you're doing things wrong, and maybe this is a better way to do something, and then being able to cope with those strong objections about something they've heard about your company is something that I would probably add in there. And as I say, the other things is just about evidence, and your evidence during a recruitment process is just a bit different. And so I also noted that people weren't rating very high, so showing examples of business cases that people have done, for example. So I suppose people were just thinking that they might not have done it really. Somebody else might have done it and helped them a hell of a lot with it, I suppose, as they're thinking. But Yeah, evidence in pre-sales is hard because you don't really have your manager sitting in the back of the room for a presentation, very rarely.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. Yeah. And jumping back to the having hard conversations, one of the so the company we work with, a big component of this for them also was kind of setting boundaries with AEs.
Oh yes, of course, it's that element as well. Yeah, it's I suppose the biggest struggle that all the leaders have is trying to establish, trying to get a partnership more than some sort of subservient role.
Exactly.
But
and they defined it as part of it was kind of EQ, diplomacy, looking for a win-win, influencing, convincing, the positive side, and another part was just knowing where to put a limit in.
Yeah, exactly. That like, oh, you want me to do a demo tomorrow?
Yeah.
Somewhere else, long trip, all those things. I just I've been meeting a lot of my old colleagues, old salespeople, some super successful. In fact, all of the most super successful salespeople, and all of them were super respectful for people's time and
100%.
And it's definitely a problem with the sales team if they think that's perfectly reasonable behavior to do. So, but it's hard. Yeah, junior needs some help, but that's where I suppose the coaching and mentoring I'm talking about comes in. How to diplomatically get yourself out of something. And then I've also done stuff where I've done workshops with sales and pre-sales in a room and getting them to say what they both want from the other team. And in fact, when you see what they really want, they actually do want the same things. And we're just trying to bring that up, which is, you want a killer presentation, which is well researched and is nicely tailored exactly to what the customer wants. And you want the time to be able to do that and to be able to do the discovery, to find these things out and to prepare something. So you both want the same thing. So after a delay, Mr. Salesperson, it'll be better than just turning up and chucking up and having to do it again later.
Yeah, absolutely. And so on that note, if people are interested in receiving the competency model from you, talking through, seeing how they can incorporate it into their own organizations, how can they contact you, and what other types of advice and help do you give to different organizations?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously LinkedIn. I'm not choking from emotion here. I'm just saying it's LinkedIn would be good to reach me. I guess you'll make it clear what my name is. Usually quite easy to find. I actually am a partner, but I'm an independent consultant, but part of a partnership called Positive Momentum, and I'm helping all leaders of pre-sales, strategic consulting, sales engineers. There's a long list. I'm helping them with the organizational things, compensation models, being obviously training plans and development areas, and really trying to help the change stages, the points of growth that an organization goes through, and they also do a bit of leadership as well, leadership coaching for people. So yeah, there's lots of different areas. I think there's actually lots of transferable skills as well, because I'm seeing jobs advertised in engineering areas or telco or others where they still have a pre-sales concept. Sometimes they're demonstrating a piece of machinery or something, or some other thing. But there's a big wide world out there that I think the skills that we've learned in the software industry, especially the SaaS scenarios that are around renewals and having to constantly sell to a customer even when they bought, is something that a lot of the other organizations, a lot of other industries will need to get into. You think about Jaguar Land Rover, and their cars are now laptops on wheels, and they're selling services, capabilities that your car can use or not use, and you can turn them off again if you don't want them. So they're becoming a software scenario.
Yeah. And it's a big cultural shift so they've got the maturity obviously it's got a long way to go. So.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm trying to help as many different industries take some of the knowledge from the software world.
Amazing, super. This has been such an interesting, insightful conversation. Thank you so much for your time, Chris. Is there anything you wanted to add or before we wrap up?
No, just a thank you to you both. give me a chance to talk about something I care a lot about, and I think it's super important. And I hope others will agree with me.
Yeah, it definitely shows that you care. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. It was
Thank you.
very, very good having you. Thank you.